I'm glad to see all of you are here on time, and it's going to be, and I hope I have some very good information for you to take away from this webinar. And first of all, thank you to Mr. Arul for that lovely introduction, and thank you to SRIT Institution for having me on this show. My name is Joshua Verghese, and I'm a motoring journalist currently working with Bike India and Car India magazines based in Pune. So I was just going through the live comments section, and I noticed a lot of you are faculties from different colleges across the country. And if there are students as well, I would like you to say a hi, so I know what kind of an audience I'm speaking to. All right, so let's begin. As I said before, my name is Joshua Verghese, and my career is motoring journalism. This is a very small profession in the country, especially in our country. And basically, what it does is I'm like any other journalist, but I focus on automobiles, on motorcycles and cars. Now, what I do is every time a manufacturer releases a new motorcycle, I go to their testing facility or to a racetrack and I test that motorcycle. I see how fast it can go, how quickly it can go. Then I come back and I write about it. And this review is published in the magazine and on websites and in videos and stuff like that. In addition to that, I also do a lot of traveling, as in I do trips like across 3 countries or from one end of India to the other end of India. And I write about these trips as well. And during racing season, I do a bit of racing as well. So that's a gist about my job. And before I did the job, I was an engineer. I was an engineering student myself. I passed out from the SRM Institute of Technology in 2016. Now, many of you must be wondering why I took up this journalism job after practicing engineering. Well, to be honest, mechanical engineering has always been my passion, and I've been very curious about machines. But at the same time, I knew that I did not want an engineering job. I wanted to do mechanical engineering so that I would have a good base when I shifted to motoring journalism. And that's why I did engineering. So before we begin the webinar, if you have any questions about this profession in particular, if you have any doubts, I will give you like 2 minutes. Please go on to the live comment section and feel free to ask me those questions. All right, I'm not seeing any queries. All right, who is making the initial investment for your traveling? All right, Mr. B. Vishwas, thank you for that question. You're the first person to ask me a question today. So to answer it, the investment either comes from my company, as in the magazine, or it comes from the manufacturer we are doing the trip for. For example, last year, I was part of this 5-member journalist team that rode from the east coast of Sri Lanka to the west coast of Sri Lanka and back. So that entire trip was sponsored by TVS Motor Company. So it depends. If it's a manufacturer event, the manufacturer sponsors, or there could be a tire sponsor. So it's either a corporate company or the magazine itself, based on the event. Vikram Sina. Yes, I will answer your question in a minute. That is the next topic I'm going to speak about. All right. Excuse me a minute while I read all this. Sriharan asks, what is the scope in motoring journalism? Well, if you're looking at making a lot of money, then it's not easy to do so right away. You have to start in the industry and you have to stand out with your work and your articles and the way you present things. And once you are a big name, then the money starts coming in and you can be a success. So the scope as such, like I said earlier, this is a very small industry in India. So to secure a job is hard. And once you secure it, you have to start working. So the scope, I would say, is very slim, and you have to be very passionate and dedicated to get a slot in one of these in one of these magazines or TV channels. And Ritik Vijay wants to know, where are my journals published? All right, so all of my articles are published in Bike India magazine and Car India magazine. They are two separate magazines, and in addition to that, we also have a website, bikeindia.in and carindia.in. So if you go on to Google and type bikeindia.in space Joshua Verghese, then you can see all my work. Priyank Vyas wants to know, can I make a work car in final year project? Uh, I'm sorry, Priyank, I don't understand your question. Could you please give me more details? Rajendra T wants to know how is the automobile field after lockdown? Well, I'm not going to lie, it's very tough because of the 2 month lockdown for the first time in the history of automobiles. Not one automobile was sold in the month of April. Not one bike, not one car, not one auto, nothing. So basically, the auto field, manufacturers, sales, dealers, service, everybody is struggling to get back to their feet because people right now are trying not to go to dealerships and not to buy cars as much as possible. But that being said, because our public transport and everything is shut down for a while, and those essential staff who have to go to work are looking at means of personal transport. So all these small cars, used cars, small motorcycles, all of this will start selling quite quickly right now. But yeah, to answer your question very generally, automobile field is recovering, but still not back on its feet yet. Nishant R, are you a biker? Yes, yes, Nishant, I am a biker. That's what I would like to call myself first. I like bikes over cars any day, and after working 5 days a week on the weekends, I'm always out riding my bike. So yes, I am a biker. Harmeet Singh says, tell me more about your profession, please. Yes, I will do that in the next section, upcoming. Sajaz Iqbal wants to know how to get into racing. I will address that as well. And Tamilinian's question, and that also I will answer shortly. Abdul Hafiz, as a job, how is this profession? Well, it's not as stressful as other professions. At least I think so because I love what I do, and I don't see my job as being stressful. I enjoy going to work every day, and I enjoy riding motorcycles and driving cars and all that. So as of now, it's not stressful, and I hope it stays that way. Nishant R wants to know, do I make a trip alone or with a group? So Nishant, it happens. So if it's a personal trip, I do it alone. I do it with friends at work. Like I said earlier, if a manufacturer is sponsoring, then there may be other journalists on the trip. Otherwise, if I'm doing something like a Kashmir to Kanyakumari run to set a record or something, then probably it'll just be me. So again, it depends on the kind of assignment I have at hand. All right. I saw an interesting question here from Mr. Michael. No, Mr. Muthuvel Rajan asks, what is the scope of automobile design? So automobile design is a design in itself is a field that evolves every day because earlier, let's say the 90s, you could go and you can design a car any way you wanted to. You can have like a sharp pointed end, you can have a flat bonnet, you can have a sloping down roof. But now, design has its own constraints because cars are being built to be more safe to pedestrians as well. So manufacturers are very conscious about how they design their vehicles because let's say there's a guy walking on the road and you go hit him with a car. So if the car is very flat and pointed, then pedestrian is going to be harmed a lot more. So now they're trying to design cars in such a way that if you are in the unfortunate position of hitting a pedestrian, then that guy suffers minimal damage when he makes contact with your car. So automobile design is now, it has a lot more restrictions, but it's a field that keeps evolving every day because as you know, we are progressing into hybrids and electrics and stuff. So manufacturers are looking at innovative designs to make these cars stand out from conventional petrol vehicles. So if you have good designs, this is a good time to invest in them. All right, okay. B. Vishwas wants to know if campus recruitment happens for motoring journalism. No, it does not, Vishwas. This has nothing to do with engineering directly. So, motoring journalism is more of a job that requires you to be passionate about what you do. And no, you can. I don't think anybody will recruit motoring journalists from engineering colleges. You'll have to, if you want the job, you'll have to look for it yourself. Is there Sugit Sethi asks, is there possibilities of coming next generation eco-friendly automobiles and cars? Okay, so Sugit, to answer your question, all the cars in India right now that are either micro hybrids, mild hybrids, plug-in hybrids, full hybrids, or even electric vehicles, all of them use lithium-ion batteries as the base because lithium-ion batteries power density and power discharge is much more consistent than any other battery technology, any other feasible battery technology that we have right now. So yes, at least for the next few years, you can expect all of our electric products or hybrid products to be powered by lithium-ion batteries. Rajendra T wants to know if automobile companies will revive after the lockdown. Yes, Rajendra, the automobile companies will certainly revive, but it won't be instant. We expect it to happen around early 2021. So this year will mostly be an uphill struggle, but if things go well and the pandemic passes and everything subsides and the economy is back up, then by 2021, the automobile industry should be back to where it was before Corona happened. Kanagavel Palani wants to know how to increase motor sale through dealer showroom. Sorry, Mr. Palani, but that seems like a business-oriented question, and I don't think I'm the best person to answer it. Sorry about that. And Priyank, you asked, can I make a design of a final year project? And yes, you can. Yes, if you could making a design and presenting it is a big thing to do in a final year. So, like I said earlier, if you can go on to websites like Euro NCAP, which is basically an organization that tests the safety of all cars. For example, you might have seen Volvo cars have a 5-star rating. So it has a 5-star rating because that car is very safe. So if you go on to NCAT, you will get all these guidelines as to how cars have to be designed and what is expected and stuff. So if you can follow that and make a design, then I think that would make a great final year project. I mean, check with your professors as well, and they'll be able to provide you better direction. Praveen Shalini wants to know what bike I have. I have a 2015 Yamaha YZF R15 version 2, and if things go well, I will buy another motorcycle soon, a twin-cylinder Yamaha. So let's see. All right, will electric vehicles rule the future? I will address that later in the thing. All right. B. Vishwas, how is the scope for introducing motoring journalism as an elective subject? Oh, that's an interesting question. I mean, I would like to see it done, but I cannot comment on it right now. Please get in touch with your college people and see if it's possible. If it is, I'm willing to help in any way I can. All right, so we're gonna start about. I'm gonna answer one more question, which is Mr. Palani's opinion about the RE Himalayan, and then we're gonna proceed. So the Royal Enfield Himalayan was a game changer when it was launched because it was India's most affordable ADV adventure tourer at that time. It is a motorcycle that can do anything, anywhere. And that being said, the motorcycle has gone through about 5, 6 iterations right now. And currently, the BS6 Himalayan is a good motorcycle because, in addition to being a very good off-roader, that engine, the BS6 engine, is a lot more refined and more reliable than before. So overall, I would say the Himalayan is a great motorcycle to buy. Okay, Vikram Sinha, I will come to your racetrack question in a bit. So now I'm going to explain about motoring journalism in a little bit more detail. So, as I said earlier, motoring journalism, as the name implies, is basically writing about cars, bikes, and travel and racing. So, the education necessary for this, you do not have to be an engineer. The first thing that magazines look for when they hire somebody is your competency in the language that they're hiring for. For example, my magazine, they write in English. So then they wanted to know if I could write well. So if you have a good writing skill, then that's 50% of the job done. And on top of that, you should be able to ride and drive decently, as in a little bit better than the average person. So you can give a review that a lot of people can understand, right? So those are two things that are very essential. And if you take the time to do little bit of research and understand about engines and crankshafts and hybrid technology and all that on your own time, then it will help you to write and understand vehicles better and provide inputs when manufacturers ask you for feedback and stuff like that. But other than that, it is not necessary to do an engineering job. If you do something like a writing course or a mass communication journalism or something, That would be better. All right. And training. So, like I said, once you have your writing skills in place, you also have to be a good rider or driver. So, for that, you have to get your own car or motorcycle and practice as much as you can whenever possible. And once you're in the job, you will be given a lot of training. For example, I have done a lot of racing schools and riding schools and driving schools and stuff for advanced machine handling. So that's something you can learn on the job. It is not easy, but it's very enjoyable, and you will look forward to doing it. Now, I'm just going to give you a little advantage and disadvantage about this career path. So the advantage is that you get to drive and ride a lot of cars and motorcycles that you would otherwise have no option to even see in real life. So that's one big advantage. And you get to travel a lot. You get to see a lot of our beautiful country, and you get to see a lot of the world also. So that has been a very fortunate experience for me so far. And other than that, racing has always been a dream of mine. So personally, that also was amazing for me. And if you look at disadvantages, well, it is a bit of a dangerous job because you're on the road and you're riding at speeds well over 150, sometimes 200 at times, and so there is a fair bit of risk involved. So it's not for the faint-hearted. If you're really committed to doing the job and you want to make a good review and you are a little bit fearless, then it's a great job to have, but it's a risky proposition at the end of the day. So you have to be ready for that as well. And like I said earlier, money doesn't come in initially. You have to put in a lot of hard work and, you have to do a lot of reading and you have to make your reviews very, very clear and concise. And that's when people start noticing you. And once you work your way up the ladder, then you can be as famous as, let's say, Mr. Jeremy Clarkson or Richard Hammond or James May from the Top Gear Grand Tour fame. All right, so now we'll move on to the main part of this webinar, which is motorcycles. And I'm going to begin by addressing the latest change in emission regulation, which is Bharat Stage 6. So as all of you know, um, pollution is a big thing for us these days. Wherever we look, there is pollution. You look at the water flowing down the canal, it's not clear. You breathe in a bit of air and it's not pure. You look at the sky and you can't see the stars. So it is about time that we accepted that pollution is something that is prevalent around us and we have to do something about it. But that doesn't mean that, but if we just shut down vehicles and cars tomorrow, then again, all of our work and economy will come to a standstill. So what the Indian government and governments across the world are doing is they are implementing emission norms uh, in stages. So previously we had Bharat stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, and 2 years ago we had stage 4. Now it's time for stage 6. And what happens in stage 6 is basically if you have a motorcycle and in a BS6 motorcycle, the emissions that come out of the exhaust has to be lesser. For example, let's say BS4 had like 14 grams of carbon. BS6 should have only 10, stuff like that. So if you look at the emissions from a motorcycle, the main emissions are oxides of carbon, oxides of nitrogen, oxides of sulfur, hydrocarbons, and particulate matter. So all of these emissions, they cannot be nullified entirely, but using a new system, they can be reduced to a greater extent. So that is why a lot of motorcycles are now extinct, as in a lot of BS4 motorcycles cannot be made BS6 because they just don't have the technology to match with the BS6 standards. So now we're just going to quickly look at what are the essential technologies necessary to make a motorcycle BS6. So we start with Onboard Diagnostics (OBD), fuel injection, a crankshaft speed sensor, NOx sensor, air mass sensor, an oxygen sensor or a Lambda sensor, and the one that most of us are already familiar with, a catalytic converter. So I'm going to just briefly touch upon some of the most important aspects of these features that are necessary to make a motorcycle BS6, starting with onboard diagnostics. So onboard diagnostics, or OBD as it's popularly called, is a program that connects directly to the engine control unit, and it uses a variety of sensors spread across various parts in the motorcycle. And based on the data collected by these sensors, the engine control unit, the ECU, will understand exactly what is going on. So to give you a better idea, let's talk about fuel injection. So if you look at a motorcycle like a TVS Victor or a TVS Apache from BS4, you had the option of buying a carbureted motorcycle. Now, right now, if you want to buy a BS6 motorcycle, you cannot find a single one that is carbureted because carburation is it's not precise. You cannot control exactly how many milligrams of fuel or how many microliters of air go into the injection chamber. So to control that to its finest degree, all manufacturers have updated their models to provide fuel injection. So when the fuel injector also has a sensor that reads exactly how much fuel is being injected, and the OBD, the onboard diagnostics, uses this information to regulate the amount of fuel coming in. Now, I'm going to give you a little idea about something called the oxygen sensor or the Lambda sensor. So if you look at your motorcycle's exhaust pipe coming out of the cylinder head, you will notice that just at the beginning of the exhaust pipe, there is a little sensor going out, a small wire that goes back into to a control unit behind the engine. So what that does is basically that is part of a system called an exhaust gas recirculation, and it is done to make exhaust gases less pollutant. So the oxygen sensor or the lambda sensor, what it does is it measures the amount of oxygen that is present in the exhaust gases um, using electrodes basically. So then you have an idea of what the concentration is. So if there is a certain amount of oxygen in the exhaust gas, that means the initial mixture that went into the combustion chamber was either rich or lean. So according to your fuel consumption and the amount of exhaust gases that are going out through the exhaust, the OBD will uh, process predetermined signals to change the amount of fuel being injected. So the lambda sensor is quite necessary for the whole BS6 thing to work. And now, last but not least, let's talk about catalytic converters. So catalytic converters are the most evident, the biggest changes that you can see in BS6 motorcycles. They are housed somewhere in the exhaust system of the motorcycle. They basically look like a honeycomb. It's like a cylindrical honeycomb structure filled with very, very precious metals like palladium, rhodium, or sometimes even platinum. So what the catalytic converter does is basically it acts as a catalyst, and when the heated exhaust gases pass through the catalytic converter, all the harmful oxides like nitrous oxides, sulfur oxides, and carbon monoxides, they are broken down to a very, very insignificant degree. So that is why these things are so important. That's why catalytic converters make a lot of difference. And that is the reason why most motorcycles prices have gone up by about from 4,000 to anywhere above 10,000 rupees, because the number of precious materials used in the catalytic converter has gone up, and that has contributed to a significant rise in the amount of in the overall price of the motorcycle. All right, so before progressing on to the next session, I'm going to just go through the live comments and see if there are any questions I can answer right now. All right. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. I will answer them as quickly as possible. Okay, Mr. Narayana wants to know what my opinion is regarding automatic driver cars. So, Narayana, I am not sure if you mean automatic as in automatic transmission or autonomous driving cars, because automatics are just transmission. You need a driver to drive the car at the end of the day. But autonomous means that you can sit in the back seat and the car will drive itself. So if you're talking about autonomous, then I think it is a reality. I think it is something that can become a reality very soon, because there are a lot of major car companies across the world, including Rolls-Royce, BMW, Tesla, and all these people are actively working on autonomous driving. And currently, data is being collected. And for autonomous driving to be a reality, terabytes of data have to be collected, analyzed, and programmed. And as of right now, there are cars that can complete a full trip from one city to another under certain conditions. So for it to reach the consumer, this it has to go from certain conditions to any possible condition, and I think that could happen in the next decade or so. But it won't be a consumer centric product anytime soon because it's going to be very expensive. So it's right now, in the near future, it may become just a luxury product. Dharani Dharan is asking about the impact of solar products in the mechanical field. Um, so that seems to be a very general question, Mr. Dharan. Could you please specify? Because if you're talking about the automotive field, then I could help you, but mechanical field seems too large a space for me to answer in a short time. So if you could expand on that, would be great. Thank you. Vikram Sena wants to know how to apply for a track license. I will get to that soon. What will be the scope of Indian motorcycle industry post-COVID age? Asks Mr. Sethi. So, Mr. Sethi, like I said earlier, because the lockdown is still not lifted entirely, our public transport system is not back to where it should have been. Trains, buses, and all are not running. But offices, including mine, have opened, and all of us have to go to work. So there will be a significant rise in the number of personal mobility options, and that includes cheap motorcycles, cheap cars, and the used car and motorcycle market as well. So if you're looking at the motorcycle industry as a whole, then I think once the pandemic passes and once the factories have their full strength working again, only then they will get back to their feet pretty quickly. So as of now, on a very optimistic note, I would say by the end of 2020 they should be back. So let's hope it goes that way and Corona doesn't complicate things further. All right. Would you modify your motorcycle as new, or should no one should have done it? Asked Mr. Palani. Okay, Mr. Palani. So modifying motorcycles is something that is very personal to every rider in the world. I mean, everybody buys a motorcycle because that's something that they've always wanted, and at least for the passionate people. So if you ask me, no, I would not modify a new motorcycle because then if you do that, you would need to have a lot of money because the moment you modify a new motorcycle, you are losing out on a lot of things, including free services, warranty, and all that. So if you're okay with that risk, then go ahead and do it. But do not make any unnecessary modifications because a motorcycle is a product of a lot of research and development. A lot of thought has gone into making it. So unless you are very sure of what you are doing, please don't do it. That would be my sincere advice. But if you have an idea, then please go ahead and consult an experienced mechanic or somebody who is very experienced in the automotive field to discuss the advantages and disadvantages of that modification. Because if it's an irreversible modification, then you can't bring your bike back to stock. So before you make any kind of modification whatsoever, sit down, take a pen and paper, note down the advantages and disadvantages, what problems you could have in the future, and if it's worth it. And once you have thought about everything and you've decided, yes, this is worth it, this is what I want to do to my motorcycle, then please go ahead by all means and do it. If you have any doubts about specific modifications like suspension or ECU remapping or anything of that sort, please do get in touch with me. I will help you as best as I can or put you in touch with someone better equipped. Akshay Rakate, you missed the name of Shagal Sheldekar. Okay, I am sorry. Mr. Sheldekar is also a very great motoring journalist, perhaps one of the best in India right now. And I've had the opportunity to meet him on some work assignments in the past, and he's a great guy to hang around with and a damn good rider. So yes, if you know Sagar Sheldekar, you have a fair idea of what my job is also like. Mr. Sheldekar contributes immensely to video content, and I contribute to published written content. So that's the difference between Mr. Sagar Sheldekar and myself. That and that he is a significantly better rider, right? And Mr. Sarvana Kumar wants to know which is a comfortable motorcycle. Excuse me, one second while I get that image. Excuse me, viewers, just give me a minute. I'm trying to find a comment. Do you suggest good and comfortable mileage bike? Mr. Kumar, that is a very vague question. Could you please be more specific in terms of what you intend to use the motorcycle for? What is your daily usage? What are your priorities? So if you give me that kind of data, I can give you a more specific answer. Okay, moving on to Mr. Vijay, who asked me to explain the Lambda sensor again. Okay, Mr. Vijay, so if you look at a BS6 motorcycle or a BS4 motorcycle, you can, where the bend pipes come out of the cylinder head, where the exhaust system begins, just after the bend, there is a small sensor that is rerouted back into the control unit. So that sensor is called a Lambda sensor. And the Lambda sensor basically works on the principle of using electrodes to detect the amount of oxygen in the exhaust gas system. So, for example, when your air fuel mixture goes in, combustion happens, and when the engine gets rid of the exhaust gases in the fourth stroke, those exhaust gases pass through the Lambda sensor, and the Lambda sensor detects how much oxygen is there. For example, 20%, 30%. And for each of these percentages, there is a certain code that is written in the ECU. So, if let's say it's more than 30%, that means you are running a very rich mixture in the engine. And running a very rich mixture may not be necessary at that point. So, you are essentially wasting fuel. So, once the ECU gets this information that the mixture is very rich, then the next time that cycle happens, it will ask the injector to inject a little bit lesser amount of fuel. So then you are using exactly the amount of fuel you need without using any more in excess. So basically, you don't have anything unburnt, and everything is being utilized to 100%. So that's the basic idea for a Lambda sensor. It is to make sure that the air fuel mixture going into the cylinder head is exactly as required, not too less or not too great. Is there, Mr. Vedavyas wants to know, is there any advantage other than pollution between BS4 and BS6? So, Vedavyas, the idea between BS4 and BS6 is primarily based on emissions. So we are not looking, so that is the primary concern. So once that is in place, only manufacturers are looking at performance and everything. So if you compare two bikes from BS4 and BS6, you will notice that the BS4 bike is usually a little bit more powerful. The BS6 bike is a little less powerful. And that is because the manufacturers are giving priority to make the bikes cleaner instead of faster. So no, not really. There is no other significant advantage, but BS6 engines are more refined. It will have lesser vibrations and they will be more smoother than BS4 engines in most cases, not all the time, right? And Kishore V, what about your earnings? That is a very interesting question, Kishore. But if you can get in touch with me on a private channel, we can discuss it. I'm not here right now. Nishant R, is there separate BS6 fuel to be used for a BS6 engine? Yes, Nishant. BS6 engines best run on BS6 fuels, and it is being updated in many places across the country right now. So maybe in the next 3 months, all of the fuel supplied in the country will become BS6. Would you modify your bike as no one would do it before? Mr. Parni. Mr. Parni, again, I do not understand what exact modifications you're looking for. So could you give me an example of the type of modifications you want to do? And then probably I could address that specifically. Sri Hariharan. Sri Haran wants to know what catalytic materials already available. Okay, so Mr. Haran, like I said, the catalytic converter right now is a honeycomb structure, and earlier they used to use materials that were a little cheaper than platinum and rhodium and all. But now, given the amount of pollution that is already present, and given the fact that we have to address this issue quickly, manufacturers have stepped it up to use more expensive materials because they seem to be better at being catalytic converters. So right now we are using materials including palladium, platinum, and rhodium, and these materials are very expensive. Like even a gram is extremely expensive, and that is one of the reasons why the sticker prices of most motorcycles and cars are going up. And as for new, more feasible catalytic converter options, there's a lot of research being done in it, and it is an industry where there is a lot of future. So if you have any ideas or whatnot, you could use that as a final year project maybe. And yeah, it could be a very profitable thing to do if you could find something new. But as of now, precious materials are what most people are using. What are the benefits and impact of solar products in the future? Wants Mr. Dharan asks. Okay, Mr. Dharan, solar, as you know, is a very good source of alternative energy. But the problem is that most solar products that we have today either require a lot of space or they charge at a very slow rate. So if you're putting that technology into a motorcycle or a car, first of all, that thing would have to be left open in a solar space and in an open space to get solar energy, and they would have to be left there for a long time, or they would have to be very bulky. So right now, there are no feasible solutions for solar mobility as such. But again, it is a field that is being looked into very extensively. So there is a lot of scope for improvement there. Yes, Mr. Praful Jotania has asked a very important question. Why has Bharat Stage 5 been skipped? So Bharat Stage 5 has been skipped simply because we have too much pollution. Because Bharat Stage 5 was supposed to go on, I think, if I'm not wrong, it was earlier last year. But when they looked at it, they realized that the the data that they had made. So when they were planning to launch Bharat Stage 5, the pollution level was expected to be at a certain level. But when they looked at it again, they realized that the pollution was already greater. So launching BS5 at that point would have been useless because the pollution was already at a much greater level. So that is the reason why they had to skip Bharat 5 and move straight to Bharat 6 to address the climbing pollution. Vignesh Vicky wants to know what I think about Tesla cars. So I think Tesla cars are one of the biggest innovations of our times. The technology they use and the amount of features they offer and the kind of engineering that goes into it is simply next level. Because if you think about it, 2 centuries ago, an internal combustion engine was a very big thing. So similarly, a modern day Tesla and the induction motors and lithium-ion battery packs uses its regenerative braking and its range extenders, and all of those technologies are similarly mind-boggling. So if there are enthusiasts among you, I would highly recommend you go online and read about Tesla's powertrain and the technology that goes behind it, because it is simply stunning to know what amount of engineering has gone into making those cars. So I think Teslas are very, very good projects of engineering. And I haven't driven one yet because we haven't had a Tesla in India yet. But I hope I do. From what I've heard, it's a very good car. Can you arrange road trip to London using an XL6? Asked Mr. Kumble. That is very ambitious, and I would love to do so, but I don't see it happening anytime soon. But why not? I will try pitching it to Maruti and to my boss as well. Let's see if they do it. I'd gladly do it. All right. Kumar J asked me, are you facing any difficulty in that field? Mr. Kumar, I do not understand which field you're talking about. So if you could be more specific, then I'd address that. Can we convert a carbureted bike into a fuel injection one? Iqbal asks. Yes, Iqbal, it is entirely possible to convert a carbureted bike into a fuel injection. But that being said, the amount of money you put into it. Let's say, for example, your carbureted bike is 60,000 rupees, and it costs you another 10 grand to convert it into a fuel injected bike. Then for 70 grand, you could just buy a fuel injected bike. So while it is possible, it may not be a feasible solution. So unless you really want to do it, I would recommend you just buy a fuel injected bike. Okay, Mr. Karthikeyan wants to know my opinion on electric two-wheelers, which is the next section. We will talk about that soon. Hasib Ahmed wants to know what is fuel injection. Okay, so to understand what fuel injection is, let's look at carburetors also. So carburetors, if you know, they are in old motorcycles. They are that component just below the fuel tank's fuel cock that you turn on, off, and reserve. So the pipe that leads from that goes into the carburetor. So what the carburetor does is basically it uses the Bernoulli's principle to push in air and release fuel. So air and fuel enter the cylinder head at the same time. So basically, it is a device that is used to that is used to provide air fuel mixture into the cylinder head for combustion. Now, carburetors are not very precise because you cannot exactly control how many milliliters of fuel or how many milliliters of air you want to inject. So that being said, that's when fuel injection came in, because fuel injection is based on an electronic circuit and it has an injector we connected to a fuel pump. So the fuel pump pumps in fuel, and the injector injects it at exact specific amounts. So then you have more clarity on exactly how much fuel is going into your cylinder head, and nothing gets wasted. So that is what fuel injection is all about. Bharat wants to know why Isuzu company stopped producing Ambassador cars. That's probably because Ambassador is now owned by Hindustan Motors, but I'm not very sure of that, Bharat. I'm sorry. Adarsh A wants to know why is the fuel injection system bike costly? Because Adarsh, unlike a carburetor motorcycle, which is largely mechanical, fuel injected motorcycles also need to have an electronic circuit. And once an electronic circuit comes onto board, you need to have a lot of programming as well, including ECU and onboard diagnostics and all that. So this is the reason why a fuel injection bike is more costly, simply because it needs a lot more systems to sustain it. All right, so let's just move on to the future of motorcycles. And like many people are asking, we're going to move on to electric motorcycles. So, like I said, pollution is a very real and dangerous threat to us right now, and we have to address it, and we have begun addressing it with BS6 and whatnot. But the next level is ultimately to make vehicles and to start using vehicles that provide zero emissions. And how do we do that? So right now, the easiest solution that we have are electric motorcycles or electric scooters, because electric scooters, the propulsion comes from an electric motor, and electric motors, like we all know, do not have any emissions. So that's the cleanest way to go forward. And again, there are different types. For example, if you're familiar with Ather Energy from Bangalore, I was fortunate enough to ride their electric scooters to test them earlier this year and in 2018 as well. And those scooters are simply amazing because they are almost as good as petrol scooters. So electrics can be the future very soon, and the biggest challenges in an electric scooter or electric vehicles for that matter is range. Because in a petrol, if you fill in, let's say, 5 liters of petrol and your scooter gives you 40 kilometers to the liter, then you still have 200 kilometers. But an electric vehicle right now in India, let's take Ather for example, they can only go up to like 85 kilometers on a full charge. So that is one of the disadvantages, but thankfully the good news is that it is being worked on. Earlier it was 50, now it's 85, tomorrow it will be 200. So it's a graph that is steadily increasing, and I think very soon electrics will be a reality, and all of us could also use electrics as well. And if you're interested in electrics, I would also ask you to look at Zero Motorcycles, which is a foreign brand. They make only electric motorcycles, and the Ultraviolet, which is a Bangalore-based company, and they have an electric performance motorcycle. So that's fairly interesting. Um, as for electric motorcycles and how they offer opportunities to engineering students, there are, like I said earlier, electric vehicles is a space that is significantly improving every day. And the major areas that they are facing development issues in are retaining charge in the battery, fast charging, then they look always looking for new power sources. So if you can think of any innovative ideas in these three modules, then you could have a great future in the automobile industry, because this is what all manufacturers want right now. They want battery technologies that will retain charge, that will lose, let's say, 20% of charge over 30 kilometers. So, and they want vehicles that charge very quickly. Like while you're having your breakfast, your car is charged to 100%. So if you can think about solutions along those lines, then you can contribute significantly to the electric vehicles segment. That being said, I had mentioned that people are looking for new power sources as well. And right now, a lot of people are not thinking beyond lithium-ion battery. The truth is that there are new other technologies as well. There are fuel cells, and more interestingly, recently I happened to see this car made by Log9 Materials from Bangalore, where they are using an aluminium where they're using a battery made of aluminium and graphene to produce current. And that battery has a range of 1,000 kilometers. So that is a new power source in itself. So if you're interested, please go look up Log9 Materials Ranger. It uses aluminium, graphene, air, and water to generate electricity. So that's the kind of sustainable solutions we are looking at going forward. All right, so I'm going to give you a little brief career and a brief idea about racing as well because somebody asked me earlier. So for racing, one of the most important things to do right now is to get your racing license. And now you will get your racing license only if you have completed a racing school. So go on to Google or something and type in racing schools and see which one is closest to you. TVS have their own racing schools. Honda have their own racing schools. There is RACR, throttle wide open and stuff like that. So once you pass out of that academy, which is like 2 days per session, like a Saturday and a Sunday, they will give you a certificate. You use that certificate and you go on to the FMSEI website and you apply for a racing license and it will be delivered to you. All right, so I think we've been speaking for about 15 minutes so far, and it's been a wonderful experience talking to all of you. So before we close the session for the day, if any of you have any questions left, please ask me. I will spend the next 10 minutes answering your questions, and then we'll wrap this up. So please go ahead, type in the comment section, and let me know what you think. Okay, Mr. Sheikh wants to know, can we make career in content creation for automotive industry or for journalists? If yes, how can we start this? So, Mr. Sheikh, creating content in this industry is a very competitive thing to do because there are a lot of content creators. So, if you want to be successful and in a full-time job as a content creator, then your content has to stand out from other people. So, that will not come initially. You will have to gain experience first working for a reputed company or something. And if you want examples, please go online, look at various videos made by different magazines like Bike India, Autocar, Power Drift, and Saga Sheldecker, and so on. And you will see the different types of content available. Each content has its own clientele. Like some people want very formal content, some people want very casual content. So you have to identify which space you would like to contribute to first and begin contributing. So to how to make a career, there is no roadmap as such. Like, and I cannot tell you do this, 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 and you will get that. No, so it's a very volatile field, and you will have to do a lot of experimenting by yourself to see what works for you and what the people want. So I would suggest you go out and find out what people are expecting, and see if you can bring your own ideas to that and bring out a final product that both of you like. Okay. Mr. Tejaswini wants to know what I can say about suspension technology for future use. So suspension is, I think suspension majorly contributes to two things on any kind of vehicle. One is handling, and the other is comfort. And if you're setting up your suspension to favor handling, then you will lose out on comfort. Like that is a proportion. So ideally, what manufacturers are trying to do is they're trying to set up the suspension in such a way that you have enough performance and enough comfort. So that being said, suspension is suspension has grown commendably throughout the ages. We had leaf springs earlier, and then there came gas-charged shock absorbers, then hydraulic damped shock absorbers, and now we have electronically adjustable shock absorbers where you have a button on the motorcycle's handlebar and you press it, and the suspension will become softer or stiffer. So going forward, I think that is the future, electronically controlled suspension, because it's simply that convenient. Um, yeah, so that's it. So suspension, because first you have to identify what you want from your vehicle. If you want handling, then you set up your suspension in a certain way. If you want comfort, then you set it up in a certain way. So for the future, I would say giving that power of adjustability to the consumer is what the future of suspension would be all about. But it won't be cheap. So it's going to be expensive. So how can you bring that to the user is what the real challenge is. Okay, Mr. Adarsh, what is the difference between BS6 and Euro 6? Okay, so Euro 6 and BS6 on the face, they are very similar emission norms, but they vary very slightly in terms of numbers. I believe Euro 6 is a little bit more stringent in, let's say, like a tenth of like a few percentages and stuff. But essentially, they are monitoring for the same noxious gases. And yeah, no, there's no significant difference. It's basically almost the same thing. Yeah. It's just that they have, I think they have a different standard for particulate matter. But otherwise, the real concern are oxides of nitrogen, sulfur, and carbon. And that is being addressed to the same degree in both emission norms. Is electric vehicles help to save petrol or gas in the future? How does it help India? Okay, Yogesh Soni, to answer your question, electric vehicles are capable of being 100% pollution free. For example, like someone else mentioned earlier, if you have an electric car that runs on solar energy, then you're basically not even using your household's electricity to charge your car. You're just using it directly from the sun, and there is no pollution involved there whatsoever. But right now in India, when you're using an electric vehicle, you are not being entirely pollution free because the current that you're using to charge your electric vehicle still comes from a coal fired plant. So will it help India? It will definitely help India. It will definitely save petrol and gas because you are using an electric vehicle that does not have a petrol or gas tank. So it will help, but the change will be slow. You will not see effects or immediately. It will take time. So it's something that we all have to do consciously and steadily. That's the key word. We have to be steady about it, like BS6 and then electrics, so then hybrids and electrics. But it will happen if we persist and we can do it. NOx emission is higher problem in CI engines for SI engines. Yes, Haran, I have read your comment and I agree. NOx emission is something that has to be dealt with very seriously because in addition to being a big pollutant, it also has very harmful effects to human beings and other animals that breathe also. Yes, I agree. Yes, Haran, we have to look at alternative methods for catalytic converters because right now, like I said earlier, it is not making the technology is one thing, but bringing that technology to the masses is another thing. Because if you make a catalytic converter that costs half the price of the motorcycle, then nobody is going to be willing to sell it. So those are areas that need a lot of development right now. So if you are passionate about it and you have ideas, I would strongly recommend you pursue them because if you have a breakthrough that could make you a very successful man. Autonomous bike, is it possible? As Selvi, no, I don't think so. I don't think autonomous bikes is something that we can look forward to because just now BMW and Honda have developed self-centering motorcycles. So they are motorcycles that can stand straight without falling over to either side. But even if somebody made an autonomous motorcycle, don't you think it would take the fun out of riding a motorcycle? Yeah, think about it because if you're in a car, at least you are sitting with a seat belt and you don't have to wear a helmet and everything. But why would you want to wear a helmet and sit on a motorcycle like that without a seatbelt or anything and have the motorcycle ride itself? So I don't think it's a practical idea. You could maybe think about it as a concept or a project, but as a practical idea, I don't think it's happening. Can we dispose lithium-ion battery and how can we balance the cell of the battery? And will you suggest? Okay. So to answer Mr. Pandey's question, yes, lithium-ion batteries are fully capable of being disposed safely. The lithium-ion batteries can also be recycled. So inside a lithium-ion battery, there are many tiny cells, and in most cases, these individual cells are getting depleted or corrupted. So it is possible to remove those cells and recycle the battery. So lithium-ion batteries are good that way. And lead-acid batteries simply cannot give you the same level of power density, charging, and power discharge as a lead-acid. Sorry, a lead-acid battery is not as good as a lithium-ion battery because of these reasons. And a lead-acid battery is more bulky. So if you have a lead-acid battery that is this big, and it gives you, let's say, 50 kilometers of range, For the same size, you can have a lithium-ion battery that gives you almost twice the range. So it's simply better technology at that point. Is there a possibility for electric vehicles to take over ICE in the market? Karthikeyan asks. Yes, Mr. Karthikeyan, there is a big possibility because the way we are going, fuel is getting depleted, and as you know, fuel is getting more expensive every day. So there might come a time when a petrol-powered vehicle is simply a luxury that a middle class man cannot afford anymore. So if the middle class man still wants to move around and stuff, he has to start considering electric vehicles at some point. So it will be a reality in the next few years. What would be the impact of BS6 on CNG cars? Not much, because CNG in itself is a very clean burning fuel, and there are not much in terms of unburned fuel or emissions and stuff. So CNG cars will not have much trouble transitioning into BS6. Mr. Praveen says lithium-ion battery because it holds high capacity of power and holds for a long time than lead-acid battery. That's exactly what I was saying. Spot on, Mr. Shalini. All right. How to increase torque and same time mileage? Okay, Mr. Pandya Rajan, that is a very interesting question, but I cannot explain it in a short, brief manner. So if you're interested, please get in touch with me after this, and we'll have a talk about that. Is it BS6 bikes that also have headlamps updated to DRL all the time? Yes. So, Mr. Sina, the headlamp on thing is not something that has anything to do with BS6. It was launched in BS4 bikes simply as a safety feature so that oncoming motorists can see a motorcycle even if they don't have their, headlamps on. So if you have a DRL running, they can at least identify there's a motorcycle coming. For example, if you're driving in a street which has a lot of tree cover and a black motorcycle is approaching from that side without headlights on, then the car guy or the motorist from this side may not see him. So the DRL is simply there to make sure that the other motorist is visible. So it's just a safety feature. Mr. Rajan, yes, electric bikes can change the future of petrol bikes entirely simply because we are running out of petrol. In BS6 fuel injection engine, is there any problem regarding airlock as it happens in a diesel engine? Asked Mr. Manjunath. So, Mr. Manjunath, of all the vehicles I have driven so far, and I've driven both diesel and petrol BS6, and I haven't had that problem, and I think it's being solved because there are a lot of new constraints. For example, the breather pipe can no longer be exposed to the atmosphere. It has to go back into the intake. And so when you account for things like that, unless you open the engine and put it back incorrectly, I don't see any possibility for an airlock or such. Yuvraj Singh asks, can catalytic converters and fuel injections be installed in BS4 bikes? Yes, they can be. A lot of manufacturers have taken their BS4 stock and just upgraded it to BS6. So it is possible. But like I said earlier, the cost of doing it, like the cost of you buying a BS4 motorcycle and then buying the BS6 components and then putting it together might become more expensive than just buying a BS6 motorcycle. So at the end of the day, it's just a question of how much money you're willing to spend. So if you want to spend the money, you can go ahead and convert a BS4 bike to BS6. Adish Bill, is it possible to overcome some defects? Please specify defects. Is it possible to fix electric bike assembly into existing petrol bike? Girisha RC asks. Yes, Girisha, it is entirely possible to convert a petrol bike to electric. But the issue, like I said before, is that the cost of conversion might actually be more than what the bike is worth. So then, unless you're doing it out of personal interest, it is not something that manufacturers or businessmen will offer as a service because it is simply too expensive to draw a profit from. But it is possible. There have been engineering colleges from Salem and Bangalore and the Northeast as well who have had students who bought motorcycles like the Yamaha FZ and fitted an electric motor into it as part of their final year project. So, yes, it can be done. Sir, why can't we do solar bikes at night so we can save energy and we can save energy? Okay, Tejaswini, I do not understand your question about using solar bikes at night, so please ask again. Tell about hybrid vehicle in automobile industry. Well, JK, I think we are at the end of the time here, and hybrid is a whole topic that I will have to go into in more detail. So if you're still interested, please get my contact and get in touch with me through email or Instagram or something, and I will be very happy to explain how that works. And I just wrote an article about hybrids in India right now. So if you go on to Google and search for carindia.in space hybrid cars in India, you will find my article, and that will have all the details you require. If you still have any doubts, please feel free to get in touch. Yuvraj Singh asks, is it worth to buy an e-bike today or should we wait some time to get a good one? So Yuvraj Singh, right now, something like there is only one electric motorcycle that's being sold in India, and that is the Revolt RV 400 and the smaller version of it, Revolt RV 300. So if you please take a test ride and see, and that electric motorcycle is, in my opinion, is just as good as a normal TVS Victor or a Honda Unicorn or something like that. You can't do a lot of high speed highway runs on it, but if you're a guy who just uses a motorcycle to go from your home to work and back, then it is a good motorcycle to buy. But if you want a motorcycle for everything, like you want to go from Chennai to Pondicherry or from Pune to Mumbai, and you want to go to work and you want to do one thing that does everything, then unfortunately we do not have an electric motorcycle in the market today. So to summarize, if you're somebody who does short runs, buy an electric motorcycle. Otherwise, buy a BS6 clean vehicle, I suppose. But it will be some time before you get a good electric motorcycle. Yes, Mr. Haran again makes a valid point about electric vehicles not having the kind of range that petrol does. That is true. They do not have that kind of range. But at the same time, they are reducing a lot of emissions, they're reducing pollution. And like I said before, the graph of range is just going up. 10 years ago, it was 20 kilometers. Now it then became 50. Now it's 85. And that aluminum hydroxide battery I mentioned earlier, that runs for up to 1,000 kilometers. So it is a curve that's steadily going up, so we can only expect improvements from now on. Tarun asked, should we pay for the racing school? Yes, Tarun, there is a fee for the racing school. It is not free. You will have to enroll and pay the fees, rent a motorcycle, buy riding gear, good helmet, and yes, so it is an expensive affair. It's not cheap. What are the disadvantages of BS6? Asked Sujit Kumar. So, Sujit Kumar, the main disadvantage of BS6, I would say, is that to make engines more clean, some manufacturers have had to reduce the power. And that is the biggest disadvantage because all of us want more power, right? And BS6 engines seem to be a little less powerful than BS4 engines. But I think as they get more data, maybe the next batch of engines will start becoming more powerful. Matthew KK, can you give any alternatives to reduce pollution? Sure, Matthew. So, reducing pollution starts from each individual. Okay, so for example, let's say you go to buy your groceries on a scooter. Instead of going to buy your groceries on a scooter, take a bicycle, walk, or buy it on the way back from work. Or similarly, when you're going to work, instead of four people going on four bikes, why can't four people go on two bikes? Do carpooling, do bike pooling, use public transport as much as possible. So the change required to combat pollution has to come from each of us. So if you can reduce your carbon footprint by 20%, then that is a big thing to do. So let's start there. Let's take baby steps and not utilize vehicles unless absolutely necessary. That's one way of doing it. Okay, Sajaz Iqbal asks, why don't manufacturers like Honda, Yamaha, Suzuki launch their entire line of motorcycles? That is because most of these manufacturers, actually all of the manufacturers, before launching any product in a country, They go to that country and they take feedback from customers and they do something called market analysis. So in their market analysis, if the market analysis shows that this particular model, like for example an ADV, does not have a market in India, then Honda will not bring it to India, because to bring it to India, they will have to do promotions, they will have to do advertisements, they will have to put in a production line, train technicians and all that, and they have to invest, let's say, about 20, 30 crores. And if they're investing that amount of money, and the market analysis shows that there are no customers to buy the bike, then it's quite pointless for them from a business point of view. So that's the reason motorcycles like that don't come to India. It's simply a business call because we don't have the kind of people to buy it. Abdul Salam, I saw many videos that vehicle runs through water. So, Mr. Salam, I think you mean vehicles run on water, through water. I don't think so. I think you're talking about vehicles that use water as a power source. The government, why they haven't done it, I do not know. But I hope they do. It's a good thing, right? Akshay Rakate asks, do you write any blogs or do you have website? So I do not have a personal website as such. I use my own Instagram channels and I write for Bike India's website, which is bikeindia.in. So you can find all of my articles there. What is the average life of batteries in Aether? What is the predicted rate of performance deterioration of such batteries? So Aether's batteries are lithium-ion, and they are using an 18701 cell, I believe, if I'm not wrong. So if you go on to bikeindia.in space Aether 450X, then you will find my first ride review, and in that I have explained the battery technology quite in detail. So please go ahead and give that a read, and if you have any doubts, do let me know. Can electric vehicles compete with the power of IC engines? Ask fascinating entertainment. Yes, absolutely. There are electric vehicles on the planet today that make in excess of 1000 Newton meters right from the start. So in an IC engine, you cannot make power immediately. The engine has to spool up to a certain RPM, let's say like 2000 RPM, 3000 RPM, and that's when all of the power comes in. In an electric motor, the power comes in right there. You step on it, and the power is there. So electric vehicles are actually, if I may, in some cases more powerful than IC engines and faster also. So if you look at cars like uh, the McLaren P1 or the Porsche 918, they use hybrid systems and stuff, and that contributes to making them much faster cars. Abdul Salam asked, to charge EV in our houses, we should get profit from the government. I think that's a good idea, but ultimately the government has to take a call. So hopefully, let's hope that happens. Vikram Sina says autonomous vehicles will kill driving experience. Yes, I agree, but it is a technology we have to explore, at least for the engineering side of it. But yes, it does kill the experience for people like you and me who enjoy driving or riding. All right, okay. I hope I've answered all of your questions. Thank you very much for having me as a guest, SRIT, and the wonderful audience as well. If any of you have any questions about cars, bikes, travel, or racing, please do get in touch with me. My ID on Instagram is MotoNight, that is